All right, we're back. Me and John Weeks reading Ordinary Men and talking nonsense in the process. So I've already read through chapter one and chapter two today a little bit. I haven't read chapter three, but I figure we'll probably get through three chapters. The first chapter is like 1.5 pages. It just kind of gives you a little bit of of where the battalion came from, and then the second chapter starts getting into the history and really tying things together. So I figure this will give us a good foundation to be launching off of. And if you, as always, anytime you want me to stop, you have something to add or something to comment, just ask me to stop and I will stop and
Will do, sir.
we will converse. And I'm going to mispronounce a lot of these words because I do not speak German. So forgive me for my mispronunciation of Polish and German village names and all that good jazz.
I think
Um,
you're close enough.
uh, something. Well, I mean, I'm the right color. All right. Chapter one. One morning in Josepho. In the very early hours of July 13th, 1942, the men of Reserve Police Battalion 101 were roused from their bunks in the large brick school building that served as their barracks in the Polish town of Bilgaraj. They were middle aged family men of working and lower middle class background from the city of Hamburg. Considered too old to be of use to the German army, they had been drafted instead into the Order Police. Most were raw recruits with no previous experience in German occupied territory. They had arrived in Poland less than 3 weeks earlier. It was still quite dark as the men climbed into the waiting trucks. Each policeman had been given extra ammunition, and additional boxes had been loaded onto the truck as well. They were headed for their first major action, though the men had not yet been told what to expect. The convoy of battalion trucks moved out of Bilgarage in the dark, heading eastward on a jarring washboard gravel road. The pace was slow, and it took an hour and a half to 2 hours to arrive at the destination. The village of Josepho, a mere 30 kilometers away. Just as the sky was beginning to lighten, the convoy halted outside Josepho. It was a typical Polish village of modest white houses with thatched straw roofs. Among its inhabitants were 1,800 Jews. The village was totally quiet. The men of Reserve Police Battalion 101 climbed down from their trucks and assembled in a half circle around their commander, Major Wilhelm Trapp, as a 53-year-old career policeman affectionately known by his men as Papa Trapp. This time had come for Trapp to address the men and inform them of the assignment the battalion had received. Pale and nervous, with choking voice and tears in his eyes, Trapp visibly fought to control himself as he spoke. The battalion, he said plaintively, had to perform a frightfully unpleasant task. This assignment was not to his liking. Indeed, it was highly regrettable, but the orders came from the highest authorities. If it would make their task any easier, the men should remember that in Germany the bombs were falling on women and children. He then turned to the matter at hand. The Jews had instigated the American boycott that had damaged Germany, one policeman remembered Trapp saying. There were Jews in the village of Josepho who were involved with the partisans, he explained, according to two others. The battalion had now been ordered to round up these Jews. The male Jews of working age were to be separated and taken to a work camp. The remaining Jews, the women, children, and elderly, were to be shot on the spot by the battalion. Having explained what awaited his men, Trapp then made an extraordinary offer. If any of the older men among them did not feel up to the task that lay before him, he could step out. Chapter 2. The Order Police. How did a battalion of middle aged reserve policemen find themselves facing the task of shooting some 1,500 Jews in the Polish village of Josepho in the summer of 1942? Some background is needed, both on the institution of the Order Police and on its role in the Nazi police policy of murdering the Jews of Europe. The Order Police resulted from the third attempt in interwar Germany to create large police formations with military training and equipment. In the wake of the German defeat in World War I, revolution broke out in Germany. As the army dissolved, military officers and government officials, fearful of being swept away by revolutionary forces, organized counter revolutionary paramilitary units known as Freikorps. When the domestic situation stabilized in 1919, many of the Freikorps men were merged with regular police into large formations stationed in barracks and on hand to combat any further resurgence of the revolutionary threat. The Allies, however, demanded the dissolution of these police formations in 1920 as a potential violation of the clause of the Versailles Treaty, limiting Germany's standing army to 100,000 men. After the Nazi regime was established in 1933, a police army of 56,000 men was created. These units were stationed in barracks and given full military training as part of Germany's covert rearmament. When Hitler openly defied the disarmament provisions of the Versailles Treaty and reintroduced military conscription in 1935, the police army was merged into the rapidly enlarging regular army to provide cadres of commissioned and non commissioned officers. The police army played no small role as a training ground for future army officers. As of 1942, no fewer than 97 generals in the German army had previously served in the police army of 1933 to 1935. The preservation of large military formations within the police had to await the appointment of Heinrich Himmler, already head of the SS, as chief of German police in 1936, with jurisdiction over all police units in the Third Reich. Himmler divided the various German police into two branches, each under a main office in Berlin. Under the security police main office of Reinhard Heydrich were the notorious secret state police to combat the regime's political enemies, and the criminal police, which was basically a detective force for non-political crimes. The second branch of the police was the Order Police main office under Kurt Deluge. Deluge had charge of the city or municipal police, the rural police, equivalent perhaps to county troopers, and the small town or community police. By 1938, Deluge had over 62,000 policemen under his jurisdiction. Nearly 9,000 of them were organized into police companies called Police Hundertschaften of 108 men each. In each of 10 cities in Germany, 3 police companies were brought together into yet larger police training units. In 1938 and 1939, the Order Police expanded rapidly as the increasing threat of war gave prospective recruits a further inducement. If they enlisted in the Order Police, the new young policemen were exempted from conscription into the army. Moreover, excuse me, because the police battalions, like U.S. National Guard units, were organized regionally, they seemed to offer the guarantee of completing one's alternative to regular military service not only more safely, but closer to home. With the outbreak of war in September 1939, the Order Police had reached a strength of 131,000 men. The big threat to its large military formations was, of course, absorption into the German army, a move avoided through a compromise for which the Order Police paid a heavy price. Many of its best units were formed into a police division of nearly 16,000 men that was put at the disposal of the army. It subsequently fought in the Ardennes in 1940 and took part in the attack on Leningrad in 1941 before Himmler got it back in 1942 as the 4th SS Police Grenadier Division. 2 police regiments raised in newly seized Danzig were also transferred to the army in October 1939. Finally, the Order Police provided over 8,000 men for the Army's military police, or Feldgendarmerie. Feldgendarmerie. Man, these German words, man, because what they do is they take shorter words and they push them together to make one long word that means like 6 different words in English. So that's why they're so damn difficult to say. And Afrikaans does that with some words too. I am slightly familiar with some of it, but like some of these words, I'm just like, okay, please don't make me say this. In return, the other draft age men of the order police remained exempt from military conscription. To replenish its ranks, the order police was allowed to recruit 26,000 young German men, 9,000 volunteers born between 1918 and 1920, and 17,000 volunteers born between 1909 and 1912, as well as 6,000 so-called ethnic Germans or Volksdeutsche who lived who had lived outside Germany prior to 1939. In addition, the order police received authorization to conscript 91,500 reservists born between 1901 and 1909, an age group not as yet subject to the military draft. Order police conscription was gradually extended to still older men, and by mid 1940, the size of the order police had grown to 244,500. The order police had scarcely been taken into account in pre war mobilization plans, and little thought had been given to its possible wartime use. But Germany's military success and rapid expansion quickly created the need for more occupation forces behind the lines. With the outbreak of war, 21 police battalions of approximately 500 men each were formed from the various police companies and training units in Germany. 13 of them were attached to armies invading Poland. They were subsequently involved in rounding up Polish soldiers cut off behind the advancing lines, collecting weapons and military equipment abandoned by the retreating Poles, and providing other services to secure the rear areas. The number of police battalions rapidly expanded to 101 by mid 1940 as the 26,000 new young recruits and many of the older drafted reservists were formed into battalion units as well. 13 battalions were stationed in German occupied central Poland, known as the General Government, and 7 were stationed in the western Polish territories annexed to the Third Reich, the incorporated territories. 10 were stationed in the occupied Czech lands of Bohemia and Moravia, known as the Protectorate. In addition, 6 battalions were stationed in Norway and 4 in the Netherlands. The order police were quickly becoming an essential source of manpower for holding down German occupied Europe. The new battalions were created in 2 ways. First, to provide the necessary cadres of non commissioned officers, career policemen, and pre war volunteers from the initial battalions that went into Poland in 1939 were promoted and distributed to the newly formed units, whose ranks were filled with older drafted reservists. These battalions were designated reserve police battalions. Second, particular units were formed from among the 26,000 young volunteers allocated to the order police in the fall of 1939. They would become, in effect, the new elite formations of the order police. The presence of the order police in the general government was felt in 2 ways. First, in each of the 4 districts into which the general government had been divided, Krakow, Lublin, Radom, and Warsaw, a permanent regimental commander and staff were established. Each district regiment was composed of 3 battalions that were constantly changing as they were rotated out from Germany on tours of duty. Second, there was a thin network of smaller units of order police throughout the general government. In each of the major Polish cities, a Schutzpolizei station was established. Its primary task was to supervise the Polish municipal police. In addition, there were 30 to 40 small gendarmerie posts in the medium-sized towns of each district. Both the Schutzpolizei and the gendarmerie units, like the 3 battalion commanders, reported to the district commander of the order police, the KDO. By the end of 1942, the total strength of the order police in the general government had reached 15,186 men. The Polish police under order police supervision numbered 14,297. One chain of command led upward from the order police battalions, as well as from the network of smaller units, through the district KDO to the overall commander of the order police in the general government, in the capital city of Krakow, and finally to Deluge's main office in Berlin. This was the normal chain of command for matters solely concerning the local order police units. However, there was a second chain of command for all policies and operations that involved the joint action of the order police with the security police and other SS units. In the general government, Heinrich Himmler had appointed a higher SS and police leader, Frederick Wilhelm Kruger, as his personal representative, with special responsibility to coordinate any actions involving more than one agency of Himmler's sprawling SS and police empire. In each district in the general government, there was an SS and police leader who had the same responsibilities and powers on the district level that Kruger exercised for the general government. For the District of Lublin, where Reserve Police Battalion 101 was stationed in 1942 to 1943, the SSPF was the brutal and unsavory Odilo Globoknik, a crony of Himmler's who had been removed from his position as party chief in Austria for corruption. Thus, order police units in the Lublin district could receive orders either from Deluge and the Berlin main office through the BDO in Krakow and the district KDO, or from Himmler through the HSSPF, Kruger, and the district SSPF, Globoknik. As the murder of Polish Jewry was a program involving every branch of the SS and the police, it was the latter chain of command that would be crucial for order police participation in the final solution.
A couple thoughts.
Yes, sir.
When I was in college, I dated a woman whose father had been in the U.S. Army during Desert Storm, and I got a chance to have drinks with him and some of his war buddies one night, and they talked all about their experiences. They referred to the war as Saudi because that's where they were first stationed in Saudi Arabia. And they all had a similar experience when they got called up for the war. They were, I think most of these guys were Army Reserve, if I recall correctly. And they got called up, brought to the barracks. They're in uniform. They're all set up. They're at attention. Like, we're going to Saudi Arabia. But then the officer is like, this is a volunteer mission. So you've got to volunteer. And like everyone volunteered. No one wanted to be like, I'm not going to do it. And I always thought that was funny. I was like, oh, it's a weird like mind game. Because obviously they didn't. At the time, I thought, oh, well, yeah, they didn't just send them a letter like, hey, would you like to volunteer? Because people are going to say no. I could see how they're using that psychology. But so I thought about that in the first chapter where the commanding officer, the Papa, is like, look, anybody who doesn't want to do it doesn't have to do it. But it's like, you're already there.
Yeah.
It's not like he's like, yo, tomorrow we're going to go do this. Anybody who doesn't want to go, just don't be here tomorrow. Like, he gets you there in uniform, armed. The sun's coming up. It's about to go down. And who doesn't want to do it, doesn't. This is a volunteer mission. And then the second thought I had was they're talking about how this was kind of like the author's talking about how this battalion is kind of like the National Guard, where if you join it, you are exempt from military conscription. And it's regional, so it's not just safer, but it's closer to home.
Right.
And I thought about how, like, many a young man and woman in the United States in the past 25 years has joined the National Guard thinking, oh, it's like one, like every other weekend or so, like 1 weekend a month, and then like 2 weeks out of the year.
2 weeks a year, yeah.
If there's a hurricane, I'll be like stacking sandbags or
yeah.
And then it's like, you're going to Iraq.
Yeah.
And I was like, that.
Well, you got to get the sand for the sandbags.
It's like, and I know, like, people would talk about like during Katrina, the New Orleans or the Louisiana National Guard is like is literally in Iraq and stories like that. But I'm like, well, I mean, like that's one thing, but this, like, where it's like, avoid the war, serve safely, closer to home, and then like, actually, we need you to do a genocide.
Yeah.
To shoot women and children in this village this morning. Anyone who doesn't want to, you don't have to. But you're here, so what are you going to say? No?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a peer pressure element of it too, because like you're sitting here, you're serving with these other soldiers, and they're doing it, and you know that they don't want to do it as bad as you don't want to do it. And so if the guy that you've been training with for the last year, 2 years, that you've been serving with for the last 5, 6, 7 years, that you know really well, and he's your brother in arms, and it's his job to watch your back, it's your job to watch his back, and that's who you're fighting for, and he's sucking it up and doing it and doing the dirty work. You feel like a traitor if you leave your brother out there to do the dirty work by himself. And so there is this like kind of like this psychological peer pressure type element going on there, you know, unknowingly. It's not that your buddy's like poking you in ribs going, "Oh man, you're too much of a pussy to kill a child." But at the same time, at the same time, you see your brother doing it and you're like, "Man, I got to back my dude up."
Diabolical.
Yeah. So, Chapter 3: The Order Police and the Final Solution, Russia, 1941. The initial participation of the Order Police in the Final Solution, the Nazi mass murder of European Jewry, occurred not in Poland but in Russia in the summer and fall of 1941. In preparation for the invasion of Russia and the war of destruction, Hitler intended to wage there four special mobile units of the SS known as Einsatzgruppen were formed and trained in the late spring of 1941. The core of these units came from Heydrich's security police, as well as his intelligence apparatus. They were supplemented by small units of Waffen SS. In addition, however, the three companies of Order Police Battalion 9 were distributed to three of the four Einsatzgruppen. Order police members thus constituted about 500 of the total of 3,000 men assigned to the four Einsatzgruppen. The Einsatzgruppen were only the thin cutting edge of German units that became involved in political and racial mass murder in Russia. In early July, a fifth ad hoc Einsatzgruppen, made up of personnel from the security police in the general government, was sent into Russia. Most of these men became the permanent security police force in the areas of the 1939 to 1941 Soviet occupation zone in former eastern Poland, while the original four Einsatzgruppen pressed deep into Russia behind the advancing German armies. For the occupation of Russia, Himmler had appointed three higher SS and police leaders for the northern, central, and southern regions, respectively. These men were in charge of coordinating all SS operations in occupied Russia. In the euphoric days of mid July 1941, when ultimate victory seemed in sight after Germany's stupendous initial military successes, Hitler ordered the intensification of the pacification program behind the advancing German lines. On July 16th, he announced that Germany would never withdraw from its newly won territories in the east. Instead, he would create there a Garden of Eden, taking all necessary measures to accomplish this. It was fortunate that Stalin had given the order for partisan warfare, Hitler said, because it gives us the opportunity to exterminate anyone who is hostile to us. Naturally, the vast area must be pacified as quickly as possible. This will happen best through shooting anyone who even looks askance at us. Himmler was not slow to respond to such exhortations from his master. Within a week, he had reinforced HSSPF Central Erich von dem Bach-Zalewski and HSSPF South Friedrich Jeckeln with an additional SS brigade each, thus adding more than 11,000 men to the SS murder campaign. Moreover, at least 11 police battalions, 9 of them 300 level and thus composed of recent young volunteers, were distributed among the three HSSPFs in Russia, adding another 5,500 order police to the 500 already assigned to the Einsatzgruppen. Between late July and mid August, Himmler toured the Eastern Front, personally urging his men to carry out the mass murder of Russian Jewry. But the Order Police actually inaugurated their murderous career in Russia before this massive buildup in the later part of July. The site was the nearly half Jewish city of Bialystok. On this on the eve of the German invasion of Russia, dubbed Operation Barbarossa, Major Weiss of Police Battalion 309 met with his company commanders. As in every other unit of the German army and police moving into Russia, he disclosed several orders that were to be passed on to the men verbally. The first was the notorious Kommissarbefehl. I've never heard that, but okay, it's notorious. Or, or commissar order, according to which so called political commissars, all communist functionaries in the army, as well as those in the civil administration, suspected of being in any way anti German, were to be denied prisoner of war status and executed. The second order was the Barbarossa Decree, which removed the actions of German soldiers toward Russian civilians from the jurisdiction of military courts and explicitly approved collective reprisal against entire villages. It was, in fact, a shooting license against Russian civilians. Major Weiss then went further. The war, he said, was a war against Jews and Bolsheviks, and he wanted it understood that the battalion should proceed ruthlessly against Jews. In his view, the meaning of the Fuhrer's orders was that the Jews, regardless of age or sex, were to be destroyed. After entering the city of Bialystok, Major Weiss on June 27th ordered his battalion to comb the Jewish quarter and seize male Jews, but he did not specify what was to be done with them. That was apparently left to the initiative of the company captains, who had been oriented to his way of thinking in the pre-invasion meeting. The action began as a pogrom, beating, humiliation, beard burning, and shooting at will as the policemen drove Jews to the marketplace or synagogue. When several Jewish leaders appeared at the headquarters of the 221st Security Division of General Pflugbel and knelt at his feet begging for army protection, one member of Police Battalion 309 unzipped his fly and urinated on them while the general turned his back. What started as a pogrom quickly escalated into more systematic mass murder. Jews collected at the marketplace were taken to a park, lined up against a wall, and shot. The killing lasted until dark. At the synagogue, where at least 700 Jews had been collected, gasoline was poured at the entryways. A grenade was tossed into the building, igniting a fire. Police shot anyone trying to escape. The fire spread to nearby houses in which Jews were hiding, and they too were burned alive. The next day, 30 wagon loads of corpses were taken to a mass grave. An estimated 2,000 to 2,200 Jews had been killed. When General Pflugbel sent a messenger to Major Weiss to inquire about the fire, the major was found drunk. He claimed to know nothing about what was happening. Weiss and his officers subsequently submitted a false report of the events to Pflugbel. If the First Order Police massacre of Jews in Bialystok on June 27th was the work of an individual commander who correctly intuited and anticipated the wishes of his Fuhrer, the second in mid-July involved clear and systematic instigation from the very highest echelons of the SS, namely Erich von dem Bach-Zelewski, Kurt Deluche, and Heinrich Himmler. Police Battalion 309 moved eastward, and Police Battalions 316 and 322 entered Bialystok in its wake. The official daily record or war diary and various reports and orders of Police Battalion 322 are among the rare surviving order police documents that have reached the West from Soviet archives. They allow us to trace subsequent events in Bialystok. The pre-invasion orientation of Police Battalion 322 was apparently not as vicious as that of Police Battalion 309, but it was certainly not free of ideological exhortation. Major General Retzlaff delivered a farewell address to the battalion in Warsaw on June 10th. Every member had to be careful, he advised, to appear before the Slavic peoples as a master and show them that he was a German. Before leaving for Russia on July 2nd, the men were informed that any political commissar was to be shot and that they had to be tough, determined, and ruthless. The battalion arrived in Bialystok on July 5th, and 2 days later was ordered to carry out a thorough search of the city for Bolshevik commissars and communists. The war diary entry of the following day makes clear what this meant. A search of the Jewish quarter, allegedly for plunder seized by Jews before the German arrival. The German police, in fact, carried off 20 wagon loads of booty during the search. By July 8th, the battalion had shot 22 people. It was a matter almost exclusively of Jews. On the same afternoon of the July 8th search, the battalion received a surprise visit from the Reichsführer, SS, and Chief of German Police, Heinrich Himmler, and the commander of the Order Police, Kurt Deluge. The battalion commander, Major Nagel, was invited to the dinner given that evening by HSSPF Central Bok-Zelewski in Himmler's honor. The following morning, Deluge held a review of the police battalions in Bialystok in Himmler's presence. In his speech, Deluge emphasized that the Order Police could be proud to be participating in the defeat of the world enemy, Bolshevism. No other campaign had the significance of the present one. Now Bolshevism will finally be destroyed for the benefit of Germany, Europe, yes, the entire world. 2 days later, on July 11th, Colonel Montua of the Police Regiment Center issued the following order. Confidential. By order of the higher SS and police leader, all male Jews between the ages of 17 and 45 convicted as plunderers are to be shot according to martial law. The shootings are to take place away from cities, villages, and thoroughfares. The graves are to be leveled in such a way that no pilgrimage site can arise. I forbid photographing and the permitting of spectators at the executions. Executions and grave sites are not to be made known. The battalion and company commanders are especially to provide for the spiritual care of the men who participate in this action. The impressions of the day are to be blotted out through the holding of social events in the evenings. Furthermore, the men are to be instructed continuously about the political necessity of the measures. The war diary falls strangely silent about what happened in Bialystok following Montua's ordering of executions, but subsequent judicial proceedings in Germany unveiled the course of events. There was, of course, no investigation, trial, and conviction of so-called plunderers to be shot according to martial law. Male Jews who appeared to be between the ages of 17 and 45 were simply rounded up and brought to the stadium in Bialystok on July 12th. When the stadium was nearly filled, Bok-Zelewski visited the site and valuables were collected from the Jews. It was a very hot day during which the Jews neither received water nor were allowed to go to the toilet. Beginning either the same day or the following morning, trucks from the motor pools of both police battalions began shuttling the Jews from the stadium to anti-tank ditches in a forested area outside the city. Most of Battalion 316 and one company of Battalion 322 guarded the shooting site and were formed into firing squads. Bok-Zelewski again appeared on the scene and gave a justifying speech. The shooting lasted until nightfall, and then the policemen attempted to carry on the executions under the headlights of their trucks. When this proved unsatisfactory, the action was broken off and completed the following day. The German courts concluded that at least 3,000 Jews had been shot, though it must be kept in mind that for judicial convenience, such figures always represent an uncontested minimal estimate of victims and not the most probable number, so as to remove that issue from judicial dispute. The murder campaign against Russian Jewry accelerated in the late summer and fall of 1941, and the war diary of Police Battalion 322 reveals its continuing involvement. On July 23rd, the battalion's formal subordination to the rear area army commander was severed. For the imminent tasks of the battalion, it was placed directly under the HSSPF Gruppenführer von den Bock. As the three companies of Police Battalion 322 moved from Bialystok to Minsk during the month of August, Lieutenant Reibel's third company particularly distinguished itself by ongoing executions of Jews in its path. Following sweeps by the third company through the forest regions around Bialowieza on August 2nd, the war diary noted, before departure, 3D Company must carry out the liquidation of Jews. Reibel subsequently reported in the early morning hours of August 10th the liquidation of the Jews lodged in the Bialowieza prisoner collection camp, was carried out by 3D Company. 77 male Jews between 16 and 45 were shot. The action was performed without incident. There was not a single case of resistance. This was not an isolated action, for 5 days later, Ribel reported the Jewish action in Neravka Mala was carried out by 3D Company on August 15th, 1941. In it, 259 women and 162 children were moved to Kobrin. All male persons between 16 and 65 years of age were shot. On August 15th, 1941, a total of one Pole for plundering and 232 Jews were shot. The Jewish execution was performed smoothly and without incident. By late August, the battalion was in Minsk, where Bokzalewski and Delush met on August 29th. As in Bialystok earlier, their meeting was the prelude to order police participation in another major mass shooting of Jews. On August 30th, the battalion commander, Major Nagel, was summoned to discuss a basic Jewish action scheduled to take place on August 31st and September 1st. The battalion was to provide two companies. On August 31st, the 1st and 3rd companies of Police Battalion 322 moved into the Minsk ghetto, where they seized some 700 Jews, including 74 women. The following day, Riebel's 9th Company took part in the execution of more than 900 Jews, including all of those seized the day before. For this first shooting of large numbers of Jewish women, the author of the war diary felt the need to provide a justification. They were shot, he explained, because they had been encountered without the Jewish star during the roundup. Also in Minsk, it has been discovered that especially Jewesses removed the marking from their clothing. Ever anxious to get credit for his company's body count, Ribel dutifully reported in the Jewish action of September 1st, the Jews seized on August 31st were shot. Shot by 9th Company were 290 men and 40 women. The executions proceeded smoothly. No one resisted. In a subsequent action in Mogilev in early October, the need to explain the shooting of Jewish women was no longer felt. For October 2nd, the war diary recorded 9th Company from 3:30 p.m., the entire company. Jewish action in the ghetto of Mogilev, together with the staff of the higher SS and police leader, Russia Central and Ukrainian Auxiliary Police, 2,208 Jews of both sexes seized, 65 shot on the spot attempting to escape. On the following day, 7th and 9th Companies, together with the staff of the higher SS and police leader Russia Central, execution of a total of 2,208 Jews and Jewesses outside Mogilev, not far from the forest camp. The involvement of the police battalions in the central region of Russia was not unique. The scant surviving documentation indicates similar involvement in both the South and the North. HSS PF Russia South, Friedrich Jecklin, who commanded a total of 5 police battalions, was careful in his cryptic daily reports to give credit where credit was due. Excuse me. The following emerges from an incomplete collection of these reports. August 19th, Battalion 314 shot 25 Jews. Battalion 45 at Slavuta shot 522 Jews. August 22nd, Battalion 45 shot 66 and 471 Jews in 2 actions. August 23rd, Battalion 314 shot 367 Jews in a cleansing action. August 24th, Battalion 314 shot 294 Jews. Battalion 45 shot 61 Jews, and the police squadron 113 Jews. August 25th, Police Regiment South shot 1,324 Jews. August 27th, according to the first of 2 reports, Police Regiment South shot 549 Jews, and Battalion 314 shot 69 Jews. The second credited Police Regiment South with shooting 914 Jews. August 28th, Police Regiment South shot 369 Jews. August 29th, Battalion 320 provided the cordon, while the staff company of the HSSPF shot 15,000 Jews at Kamenets Podolsky on August 26th through 27th, and another 7,000 on August 28th. August 31st, Battalion 320 shot 2,200 Jews in Minkovsky. September 1st, Regiment South shot 88 Jews. Battalion 320 shot 380. September 2nd, Police Regiment South shot 45 Jews. September 4th, Police Regiment South shot 4,144 Jews. September 6th, Police Regiment South shot 144 Jews. September 11th, Police Regiment South shot 1,548 Jews. September 12th, Police Regiment South shot 1,255 Jews. October 5th, Police Battalion 304 shot 305 Jews. Post war judicial interrogations in the Federal Republic of Germany, stemming from this scant documentation, uncovered further information about the murderous swath police battalions 45 and 314 cut across the Soviet Union in the fall of 1941. Police Battalion 45 had reached the Ukrainian town of Shepetovka on July 24th when its commander, Major Besser, was summoned by the head of Police Regiment South, Colonel Franz. Franz told Besser that by order of Himmler, the Jews in Russia were to be destroyed, and his Police Battalion 45 was to take part in this task. Within days, the battalion had massacred the several hundred remaining Jews of Shepetovka, including women and children. Three-figure massacres in various Ukrainian towns followed in August. In September, the battalion provided cordon, escort, and shooters for the execution of thousands of Jews in Berdichev and Vinnytsia. The battalion's brutal activities climaxed in Kiev on September 29th and 30th, when the policemen again provided cordon, escort, and shooters for the murder of over 33,000 Jews in the ravine of Babi Yar. The battalion continued to carry out smaller executions until the end of the year. Police Battalion 314 also began with relatively small three-figure massacres starting on July 22nd. It then joined Police Battalion 45 in the execution of several thousand Jews in Vinnytsia in September 1941 and shot 7,000 to 8,000 Jews in, I can't say that, on October 10th through 14th. The last shooting uncovered in the investigation dated to late January 1942 in Kharkov. The documentation from southern Russia provides a sketchy overview of the broad and continuous participation of order police units in the mass shootings of Jews, but it lacks detail. The documentation for northern Russia is just the opposite. Here we have no overview, but we do have one extraordinarily vivid description of an operation by Police Battalion 11, which had been stationed in the Kovno region since early July 1941. Its third company charged with guarding the Kovno ghetto. In third company charged with guarding the Kovno ghetto, in mid-October, the battalion commander was sent to Minsk with two companies of Battalion 11 and two companies of Lithuanian auxiliary police. The operations officer of the 707th Security Division gave the policemen their first task, the execution of all Jews in the village of Smolovichi, east of Minsk, as an alleged deterrent and warning to the civilian population not to help the partisans. The battalion commander claimed that he protested but was merely told by the operations officer and division commander that the German police could provide the cordon and leave the shooting to the Lithuanians. The massacre of the Smolovichi Jews was carried out as ordered. In late October, the two companies of Order Police and their Lithuanian auxiliaries were ordered by the army to liquidate all the Jews in Slutsk, south of Minsk, a town of some 12,000 inhabitants, one-third Jewish. Again, the measure was justified as a deterrent for the protection of German troops. What happened in Slutsk on October 27th was the subject of a report from the head of the German civil administration, there to his boss, Wilhelm Kube, in Minsk. Regional Commissioner Slutsk to General Commissioner in Minsk concerning Jewish action. In reference to my telephone report of October 27th, 1941, I submit the following to you in writing. On the morning of October 27th, about 8 o'clock, a first lieutenant of Police Battalion 11 from Kovno appeared. He introduced himself as the adjutant of the battalion commander of the security police. The first lieutenant declared that the police battalion had been assigned the task of carrying out the liquidation of all Jews in the city of Slutsk within 2 days. The battalion commander was approaching with a force of 4 companies, 2 of them Lithuanian auxiliaries, and the action had to begin immediately. I thereupon answered the first lieutenant that in any case, I first of all had to discuss the action with the commander. About 1/2 hour later, the police battalion arrived in Slutsk. As requested, the discussion with the battalion commander, excuse me, my allergy has been killing me. My nose is itching like crazy. As requested, the discussion with the battalion commander then took place immediately after his arrival. I explained, first of all, to the commander that it would scarcely be possible to carry out the action without prior preparation because all had been sent to work and there would be frightful confusion. At the very least, he was obligated to give one day's notice. I then asked him to postpone the action for one day. He nonetheless rejected this, noting that he had to carry out actions in the cities all around and only 2 days were available for Slutsk. At the end of these 2 days, Slutsk had to be absolutely free of Jews. I immediately lodged the sharpest protest against this, in which I emphasized that a liquidation of the Jews could not take place arbitrarily. The larger portion of Jews still present in the city consisted of craftsmen and their families. One simply could not do without the Jewish craftsmen because they were indispensable for the maintenance of the economy. Furthermore, I referred to the fact that white Russian craftsmen were, so to say, utterly unavailable, that therefore all vital enterprises would be paralyzed with a single blow if all Jews were liquidated. At the conclusion of our discussion, I mentioned that the craftsmen and specialists, insofar as they were indispensable, had identification on hand, and that these Jews were not to be taken out of the workshops. It was further agreed that all Jews still in the city, especially the craftsmen's families, whom I also did not want to have liquidated, should first of all be brought to the ghetto for the purpose of sorting. 2 of my officials were to be authorized to carry out the sorting. The commander in no way opposed my position, so in good faith I believed that the action would therefore be carried out accordingly. Several hours after the action began, the greatest difficulties were already becoming apparent. I discovered that the commander was not at all abiding by our arrangement. Contrary to the agreement, all Jews, without exception, were being taken from the factories and workshops and sent off. A portion of the Jews were in any case taken through the ghetto, where many were grabbed and selected out by me, but most were loaded directly on trucks and without further ado liquidated outside the city. Shortly after noon, complaints were already coming from all sides that the workshops could no longer operate because all Jewish craftsmen had been removed. Because the commander had driven on to Baranovichi, I contacted the deputy commander, a captain, after a long search and demanded that the action be immediately stopped because it was not taking place according to my instructions and the economic damage already inflicted could not be made good. The captain was very astonished by my viewpoint and explained that he had received instructions from the commander to make the city free of Jews without exception, as they had also done in other cities. The cleansing had to take place on political grounds, and nowhere had economic factors so far played a role. Upon my energetic interventions, he then nonetheless stopped the action toward evening. What else concerns this action, I must, to my greatest regret, emphasize, is last of all that it bordered on sadism. During the action, the city itself offered a horrible picture, with indescribable brutality by the German policemen as well, but especially by the Lithuanians. The Jews and also white Russians were taken out of their lodgings and driven together. There was shooting everywhere in the city, and in the individual streets, bodies of Jews who had been shot piled up. The white Russians had the greatest difficulty in extricating themselves from the roundup. Aside from the fact that the Jews, among them also craftsmen, were brutally mistreated in a frightfully barbarous way before the eyes of the white Russians, the latter were likewise beaten with truncheons and clubs. One can no longer speak of a Jewish action. It appeared much more like a revolution. I and all my officials were in the midst of this all day without a break in order to save what could still be saved. Repeatedly, I literally had to drive German police officials, all as well as Lithuanians, out of the workshops with drawn revolver. My own gendarmes were given the same task but because of the wild shooting, often had to get off the streets in order not to be shot themselves. The entire scene was altogether more than ghastly. In the afternoon, a large number of horse drawn carts without drivers stood around in the streets, so that I had to assign the city administration immediately to take care of them. Afterward, it turned out that they were Jewish wagons that had been assigned by the army to transport ammunition. The Jews had simply been taken down from the wagons and marched off, without anyone caring for the wagons. I was not present at the shootings outside the city, thus I can say nothing about the brutality, but it suffices when I emphasize that long after being thrown in the grave, some of those shot worked their way out again. Concerning the economic damage, I note that the tannery was most frightfully affected. 26 experts worked there. In one blow, 15 of the best specialists among them were shot. Another four jumped from the wagons while underway and escaped, while seven avoided being seized through flight. Five men worked in the wheelwright shop, four of whom were shot, and the shop must now be kept going with only one wheelwright. Still, other craftsmen are missing, such as cabinet makers, smiths, etc. So far, it has not been possible for me to get a precise overview, as I already mentioned at the beginning. The families of the craftsmen were also supposed to have been spared. Today, it appears, however, that in almost every family, some people are missing. Reports come in from everywhere, from which it can be concluded that in some such families, the craftsman himself, in others, the wife, and in yet others, the children are missing. Thus, almost all families have been torn apart. In these circumstances, it must be very doubtful if the remaining craftsmen are enthusiastic about their work and produce accordingly. The more so in that at the moment they are still walking around with faces beaten bloody on account of the brutality. The White Russians, whose full trust had been won, stood there aghast. Although they are intimidated and do not dare to express their opinions freely, one nonetheless hears it said that this day represented no page of glory for Germany and that it will never be forgotten. I am of the opinion that through this action, much has been destroyed that we had achieved over the last months, and that it will be a long time before we can again win the trust of the population. In conclusion, I find myself compelled to point out that during the action, the police battalion plundered in an outrageous way, and indeed not only in Jewish houses, but just as much in the houses of the White Russians. They took with them anything useful, such as boots, leather, textiles, gold, and other valuables. According to the accounts of members of the army, watches were torn from the arms of Jews publicly in the streets. Rings were pulled off fingers in the most brutal way. One senior paymaster reported that a Jewish girl was ordered by the police immediately to fetch 5,000 rubles. Then her father would be released. This girl is said to have run around everywhere trying to get the money. Also within the ghetto, the individual barracks that were nailed shut by the civil administration and provided with a Jewish inventory were broken into and robbed by the police. Even in the barracks in which the unit was lodged, window frames and doors were torn out for the campfire. Even though I had a talk with the commander's adjutant on Tuesday morning concerning the plundering, and he promised me in the course of the conversation that no police would henceforth enter the city, several hours later I was forced once again to arrest two fully armed Lithuanians because they were caught looting. On the night of Tuesday to Wednesday, the battalion left the city in the direction of Baranovichi. The population was manifestly happy as the news spread through the city. So much for the report. I will come to Minsk in the near future in order once again to discuss the matter orally. At the moment, I am not able to continue the Jewish action. First, peace must return. I hope to be able to restore peace as quickly as possible and despite the difficulties to revive the economy. I now ask only that one request be granted me. In the future, spare me without fail from this police battalion. Carl. Though the documentation of police battalion participation in the mass murder of Russian Jewry is not extensive, it does suffice to disprove beyond any reasonable doubt the chief post war alibi of the Order police leadership, namely that Deluge had reached an agreement with Himmler whereby the Order police would assist the security police, providing guard duty and any services short of shooting, but were forbidden to be the executioners themselves. This alibi, akin to the post war claim of the Waffen SS that they were soldiers like any other and did not participate in the ideological grounded programs of the rest of the SS, was successfully pleaded before at least one German court in the trial of Police Battalion 11. The defendants persuaded the court that after only two executions upon army orders in the Minsk region, they were able to invoke Deluge's arrangement to secure their recall to Kovno. As the documentation shows, the direct participation of the Order Police in the mass executions of Russian Jews in the summer and fall of 1941 was pervasive, occurring within the jurisdictions of the northern, central, and southern HSSPFs, as well as in Bialystok. Bialystok. Moreover, the mid July massacre in Bialystok took place directly after Deluge and Himmler met there with Bach-Zelewski. And after September 1st, massacre in Minsk occurred immediately after Deluge's visit with Bach-Zelewski in that city. Clearly, Deluge was not forbidding, but rather inciting Order Police participation in the mass murder. Order Police involvement in mass shootings in Russia after the fall of 1941 is not well documented and, in all probability, was much less frequent. The major exception was extensive Order Police participation in the shooting of Jews in the Pinsk region in the fall of 1942. In the military crisis of the 1941-1942 winter, many police battalions were pressed into frontline duty. Others had to contend with growing partisan resistance. Moreover, the number of men recruited from native populations into auxiliary units under the Order Police increased nearly tenfold in 1942, from 33,000 to 300,000. There was a constant tendency to assign the actual shooting duties to these units in order to shift the psychological burden from the German police to their collaborators. This psychological burden was serious and extended even to Bach-Zelewski himself. Himmler's SS doctor, reporting to the Reichsfuhrer on Bach-Zelewski's incapacitating illness in the spring of 1942, noted that the SS leader was suffering, especially from visions in connection with the shootings of Jews that he himself had led, and from other difficult experiences in the East. All right.
Made it through.
I did. Man, my nose right there towards the end, my eyes started watering, my nose is itching like crazy. My allergies. We had this storm blow through the Gulf, and it was a tropical storm that blew through the Gulf. We got a very small bit of the rain. It didn't really hit us very hard, but it went just south of us and hit Corpus Christi. And ever since that passed, my allergies have been absolutely crazy. I don't know what it washed up. I don't know what it stirred up in the air, but
Pick
my
something
allergies
up.
have been going crazy ever since then.
I mean, I hate allergies. So rough. But you soldiered through.
I did. I did. Mouth getting dry, eyes watering, nose itching, but I made it. So you got thoughts, opinions?
I got thoughts.
Got thoughts.
I remember reading about the um the Greek secret police years ago, and that how they would train them to carry out atrocities.
Mm,
And it would start with beatings. You would beat prisoners,
yeah.
not by yourself, with a group of men. And they would, so you wouldn't kill them, you just beat them up. And they would refer to them as tea parties. And then the violence would escalate slowly until now you're torturing people, killing them. And I thought about that when the author's pointing out how these police battalions, they would start by shooting 20 people, 30 people.
Mhm.
And then it escalates into the hundreds. Then it escalates into the thousands. And even before they started killing people, it started with sort of, hey, we just want you to like round these people up and then, remove them from this village. But what you actually do with them is not specified. It's up to the certain lower level officers. And that started out as a program. They're beating the people, they're humiliating them, they're um, plundering their possessions. And then it goes from there to the killing, and then how the killing escalates up. And that something about that really seems important to me about human nature. It's hard to get someone to just spend an entire day. Like there's one part in there where they spent the entire day shooting people,
Mm-hmm.
but that wasn't the first day on the job,
Right.
and that's important.
Yeah, you got to desensitize the person to the violence. And so you start small. It's just like anything. I mean, when you go, I mean, you can put this in any context. When you go start a new job, you're not doing the hardest task the first day, right? They start you slow. They start you off. They teach you the basics. They're teaching you the ropes. You're getting to know things. And before you know it, you're the manager, right? Like a year, 2 years later, you're the manager and you're in charge of all this stuff. But you didn't start off as the manager. You started off learning the job, learning what the skills are, learning the craft, and then you worked your way up to being the manager of the warehouse or whatever, right? The supervisor. So that's the way, I mean, that's what they do. They desensitive, and that works in every way. You start like if you look at like when you watch like I watch UFC all the time, and you'll see some of these guys that come into the UFC and you can tell that they're super nervous, like their first fight. Like they call it like they say that there's like this like real like octagon jitters like the first time you're in the UFC. Like no matter how many fights you have outside of the UFC, like coming into the UFC, you got these octagon jitters. And you get in there and let's say you win your first fight, right? And in this fight, you get knocked down and but you're able to like keep your bearings about you and win the fight. Well, that prepares you for that time that you're going to fight that dude that's going to put a complete and total ass whooping on you for like 2 or 3 rounds. It prepares you for that comeback to make after that total ass whipping. Because there are guys that start off real fast in fights, and you just got to take the abuse for like 1 or 2 rounds until they wear themselves out. And then you can turn it on and you can actually, carry out your game plan. But you're the first round or two, your game plan has to be just to survive in order to get to those later rounds where you can actually institute your game plan. And it's this slow creep of learning how to take the abuse and take the violence and be in there. But you don't just get thrown in there with the heavyweight champ of the world. You got to work your way into it because you go in there an unexperienced kid with only like 5 professional fights coming into the UFC gets thrown in there with, Tom Aspinall or freaking, Justin Gaethje or any of these killers that are in the UFC. Like he's getting out of there fast. There was this one kid, he's a good fighter. I think he's from Dagestan. His name's Abus Magomedov. And it was like, I think it was his first or second fight in the UFC. They put him up against Sean Strickland. Well, Sean Strickland isn't known as a knockout puncher. He's like he'll kind of pepper you with jabs and teep kicks to your gut and just kind of beat you on points. He's kind of a point fighter, but in the second round, this guy had come out like a bat out of hell in the first round, drained his freaking battery, ran out of stamina in the second round. He lost by TKO because he just ran out of steam. And you could hear Sean Strickland in the second round going, "Oh, that's it? That's all you got?" You know? And he just put him down and, just pounded him out, you know? And that's something that you got to learn. And so that's what they're doing with these guys is they're bringing them in and they're desensitizing them and they're working them into this position and into this violence that they're going to be, encircled by. And as you see at the end of that chapter, PTSD existed then too. These guys were, even the higher ups were suffering from the things that they were um, participating in.
My understanding of the Holocaust has always been that part of the
It didn't happen. No, I'm just playing. I heard somebody say that the other day, and I was like, okay, we can talk about numbers or whatever you want to talk about, but I mean, we all know like what happened. It's just weird. I just find it funny when people, it didn't happen.
it's Russian
Okay.
propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah. It's Russian propaganda. It's like, okay, sure.
Um, but the idea, and my understanding too, is this is from German documentation, so not even Soviet documents, but that part of um, the impetus to do what maybe many of us think of when we think of the Holocaust as like the organized camps was that this shooting method was having horrific psychiatric fallout on their own guys.
Yeah.
Like our guys are losing their minds. This is inhumane
Yeah.
to our own guys, and it's also a national security threat to have tens of thousands of men in arms losing their mind.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to do this in a way that has that is like less cruel to the executioners and to the people supporting that effort.
Well, it's the way we're created. And it's kind of like this crazy dialectic that we operate within, that it's within the nature of man to go to war, but it's against man's nature to kill another man. And so it's this kind of like binary that we're fighting with all the time within, because like man is made in the image of God. So when you kill a man, you're killing an image of God, an icon of God, right? And so no matter what that person believes or how that person thinks, that that act is dehumanizing to you, to your soul. It's damaging to the individual that's pulling the trigger or going through with the crime of murder. And so if you look at like I told you last time, I love like looking into serial killers and the way they think and the way they talk about things. And if you read about serial killers, what you'll find is they start off, they have this like urge to fulfill this fantasy, but they're nervous about it. They're scared and they make a bunch of mistakes. And by the time they get caught, they're like monsters, and they brag about it and they laugh about it and they think it's hilarious. And that's like, it's so foreign to our brains, like people, like normal people like you and me, to think that it would be funny to talk about killing people. But these people have been so desensitized and have destroyed so much of their own humanity and their own soul that it's almost like evil manifested.
You were talking last time about the serial killer. I forget his last name, Israel something,
Keys.
Israel Keys, and he's a creepy one. But I remember reading about him and how like he eventually got caught, and I was like, wow, it was like he wanted to get caught because he had killed a girl and stolen her, as I recall.
Yeah, yeah. What happened was, well, one of his things that he did is he always traveled around the country because he lived in Alaska, but he traveled as a contractor around the country. And so he would always, what he would do is he would fly, like, let's say, just for instance, he would fly into O'Hare Airport in Chicago. He would rent a car and then he would drive to Vermont with his battery removed from his phone, find his victim in Vermont, kill his victim in Vermont, go complete the job in Gary, Indiana, fly back to Alaska, right? And so where his job was actually taking place was nowhere even near where the crime took place. And so there was like they had a lot of troubles connecting him. They've only connected him. I think they've only like legitimately connected him to like 7 murders. Some suspect he killed up to 33 people, but they have evidence that it was at least 11. So like there's like all these numbers, like there's all these theories, like people that had gone missing because he didn't really have a type. He just kind of like he was more like hunting. He was kind of he was a eerie guy. So what happened was he was always killing away from home. So there was no way to trace it back to him. Well, he took this girl out of this coffee house in the middle of the night, and he was caught on camera. And he usually, what he would do is when he would take people, he would take their vehicles and he would commit the acts in their vehicle, ditch their vehicle, and then make his way back to his vehicle, whether it was a rental car or in this case, it was his personal vehicle. Well, they had him and his vehicle on security camera footage. And then he started using her debit card in Texas. And they were like, well, this girl's been missing for like 3 weeks at this point. And this her credit her debit card's being used and all this money's being withdrawn from her account. And so they had all these like records and they knew generally where he was. And what he said is he said that it wasn't that he wanted to get caught, it's that he lost control. That urge within him, he just couldn't contain it anymore because he had asked the girl, he had originally gone to the coffee shop just to rob the place because he didn't only kill people, he wasn't only a serial killer, he also robbed banks and he liked to burn down churches.
Damn.
Right? Yeah, like this dude was like wild. Like he would do he from what I understand what he would do is he would kill somebody and he would be on this high, this adrenaline rush, and he wouldn't be able to like he was like I need to do something else. So he would go like sit outside of a bank and wait for him to open the doors, and before they opened the bank, when the managers first got there, he would kick the doors in and rob the bank.
Damn.
And then he would go and off into the middle of nowhere and find like an abandoned church or something and set it on fire. He's just trying to get rid of all this energy that he had built up from this rush. So it's kind of like the way he described it in his tapes was it was always like he was always trying to get that high. And it was like he could go shorter and shorter periods of time between the highs. And so it got hectic the last year. And so when he took this girl, he said he was originally just going to rob her if she didn't have a car. And so when he walked up to the coffee stand and she opened the window, he held a gun to her head and was like, "Give me all your money." He asked her, "Do you have a car?" And she said no. And then he jumped in the window and took her anyways. So and then on top of that, in order to get her debit card, because she didn't have it on her, he had to go to her parents' house and break into her truck and steal her debit card out of her truck.
Damn.
Yeah. So it was like he was just like he was self-destructive, obviously, but he had described it not that he wanted to get caught, but that he had lost control. And when they pulled him over, they said he was calm as a cucumber, man. He was just cool as could be. And he had her debit card, all money he had withdrawn from her account that day, everything in that rental car. The mask that he had worn, to go to the ATM because they have the cameras in the ATM. So he'd wear a mask, and when going up to the ATM to withdraw money, all of it had her PIN number written on the back of the debit card. He had everything they needed to nail him for her kidnapping, and he was just like whatever. He was just a total sociopath, just not a care in the world.
Now you're saying that like the way he was when he started out,
Okay, so
as
his
much as I would regard that as a monster, that by the end of it, he's escalated to this whole different
well,
monster.
that was the last one. That was the one that got him caught. Well, we don't know if that was the last one he murdered, but that was the one that got him caught. It was one of the last ones. There are suspicions that there was a homeless guy found dead in an abandoned house near Houston, close to the airport, that they suspect he was involved in that. Because that's the type of things he would do. He would hang out in cemeteries or abandoned homes and shit like that, and look for people that were like lower life, like drug addicts or whatever, looking for a place to get a fix, prostitutes, and then he would take it out on them. But okay, so he talks about the first time he was young. I think he said he was 14, maybe he was 18. He was young. It was before he went to the army. Anyway, so there was a girl, and she was in a group of kids, and out on this trail. They were in a national park. I think it was in Washington. And on these trails, they had like outhouses, kind of, for people that were walking the trails. If they needed to use the bathroom, they could use the outhouse. And they only cleaned the outhouses like once every like 2 months or something like that. And he knew what the system was. He knew how it worked because that's where he grew up, and he was always in those woods up there. So he understood how things operated out there. So his whole plan was he was looking for someone small enough he could throw down into the bottom of the outhouse,
Damn.
like when he was done with them. So this one girl, she was with this group of people, and he's like, okay, she's the perfect size. And she had kind of fallen behind the group. So he grabbed her, brought her into this outhouse, tied her up in the outhouse, and actually sexually assaulted her in the outhouse. And before he could kill her, she convinced him to let her go. And he was so nervous about this being his first time doing any of these things, he let her go.
Wow.
Yeah. And then by the end of it, there was no talking to this guy. Like if he grabbed you, he wasn't going to talk to you. He said, if I talked to somebody, I felt like I had made a connection with them, and I wasn't going to go through with what my plans were for them. So I made it a point not to have a conversation with them.
Damn.
Yeah. So,
So now this is what's so crazy. You have this guy by himself, monster, wants to kill people, is killing people, raping people, hunting them. Then you have the police battalion where most of the individual guys don't want to do it, but it's getting done at a scale that dwarfs even the most liberal uh speculation about how many people Israel Keys killed. But you do see that there's, based on that letter of complaint from the officer,
mm-hmm.
that it's like escalating into this mass sadism.
Yeah.
So the I mean, is it, do you think that the people, like, do you think Himmler is kind of like a Israel Keys, or is it just that you get these people organized in these hierarchies of power, you get the ideologies at work, and you don't need necessarily a sociopath like that at the head. You like the organization itself just takes on sociopathic.
Yeah. Yeah. When it becomes systematic, I mean, like when you're reading down that like chart, and that's what I was thinking as I was reading down, where it was like August 19th, this many Jews were killed, but and it's just point by point. It's like little bullet points, it's just like that. It just dehumanizes the whole thing. And so if you're not on the ground, seeing the blood, seeing the carnage, seeing the violence, like firsthand, right there in front of your face, it's like you're detached from it. You're not like, so you don't, I don't even know if you have to be a sociopath. You could just be completely cold, like engineer mind, like this is what must be done to succeed in the goal. And this is what the goal is. So this is what we're doing. It could be just something that cold and contemplative, that it's just somebody who's just calculating these are the costs it's going to take for us to reach the ultimate goal. And that's not to say that Himmler wasn't a sociopath. I don't know. I've never seen any kind of psychological breakdown of Himmler, but I'm just saying you don't, if you're in that position, like a city planner basically draws up the plans for the highway system, right? And they're like, given the highway system, the way it's drawn up, we expect our city to bring in such and such millions of dollars every year. As a result of us designing the city in this way, we expect 200 traffic deaths every year. We believe that the cost of 200 lives is worth the such and such $1 million that the city will gross every year. It can be something that easy.
I remember before the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel in 2023, just reading about the situation with Israel and Palestine, listening to the Scott Horton show. I remember thinking, like, damn, like, where is this going to go? This is going to go to genocide. Like, this is going to go to, like, worst, in my mind, like, worst case scenario, like the Marines U.S. Marines on the ground Palestine, just shooting the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, they're always talking about this greater Israel. And I didn't realize at the time the greater Israel meant like parts of all these other countries.
Right.
I thought it was just like the occupied territories.
Yeah, I thought it was
And I
just
was like,
West Bank and Gaza at first.
yeah, that's what I thought it was. And I was like, well, all right, well, if it's like they're not going to give them a state and they're not going to make them part of Israel and give them actual full citizenship. And like the only logic of this is going toward them all being killed. Why don't we just take them all and bring them to America?
Mm-hmm.
So I like did like the thought experiment as if like I'm not in the government. I have no say in this, but I did a thought experiment like I was in the government and that was my project. Benevolent relocation. We're going to bring, all these people here. But of course,
like the Dave Smith joke about moving Israel to Canada.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, dude, it's on his first special. It's hilarious.
I gotta check that out. That's
he's
funny.
like the Canadians are so nice that it would take them years to figure out that it had happened, but once they did, they'd be like, "You guys, next time you gotta ask." It was really funny. It's a funny bit.
Yeah, so just bring the Palestinians here, and like, okay, give them taxpayer funded houses and education and stuff. And sure, like some of them are going to be upset and commit horrific terrorist acts, but I'll have to like be like, well, I mean, like the moral price is worth it. We're going to like kill all these people and there's going to be all this blowback terrorism. And I can just like picture myself like in the meetings and there's like other bureaucrats that don't like my plan and they're attacking my plan on MS Now. And I'm like, oh, like, it's personal for me now. And how that could escalate to really horrific stuff. So then we send in the Marines to just round the people up, but they resist and kill some Marines. And the next thing you know, we're dropping napalm. I'm like signing the papers to drop the napalm.
Right.
Because they killed our guys. And it didn't start out that way.
Right. Well, and that's what I had said. Well, I think I even texted Scott. I'm pretty sure I said it on the podcast. When Israel first went into Gaza, I said, the only way that Israel wins this war is if they kill every male in Gaza. That's it. Like enslave every female and kill every male. That's it. I'm I'm not going to say like, oh, only this age, only between these ages. No, every male, because those little boys will grow up to be soldiers at one point in time and they'll want payback for what happened to their bloodline. You're going to have to kill every male. And, and I was like, I was actually, I was like, America doesn't have the wherewithal, the, the fortitude to go through with something like that. Our civilian population is much too compassionate and too humanitarian to watch our military do something like that. But I was like, I don't know about Israel. They may be able to get away with that.
Definitely giving it the old college try.
Yeah, I ain't no lie. But I know I had told Scott, and I'm pretty sure I'd said it on the podcast. I was like, that's the only way Israel wins this war and puts it like, and it's freaking done and over with is every person that identifies as Palestinian in Gaza, maybe even in the West Bank. I mean, I didn't even go as far as thinking about the West Bank, but every male that identifies as Palestinian would have to be put down.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've talked to Scott about America's defeat in Afghanistan,
Mm.
you know, and like, what about people who say like, oh, like we know we won the war in Afghanistan, but then we made the political decision to leave. And he's like, well, it's more like we made the political decision to stay. And at that point, the only way you're going to keep this government that excludes the Pashtuns as a group,
Mm.
there's some Pashtuns in the government, but as a group, they're not represented. So
Right,
now
right.
they're waging an insurgency against you. The only way to defeat that, if at all, is to just start dropping hydrogen bombs.
Hmm.
And America was not
Yeah, just
willing to do that.
yeah.
So now,
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that
right, that's just the
our
facts on the
citizen
ground.
population
Right.
will not tolerate those types of actions from our government. Like that's just all there is to it.
So now you have this American kind of Israeli war on Iran
Mm.
that's gone sideways. That's the best option, many would say, is just leave. For the US, just bring the troops home, just say, declare victory. We showed them no nuclear weapons. Um, but I mean, do you think that the US government would, I mean, sure, the civilians would be upset and might put a stop to further attacks, but do you think that the US government would unleash nuclear weapons? And then the Israeli government, by all accounts, has nuclear weapons and they can't, I mean, they're in the neighborhoods. They're not going to, unless they decide to give up on that territory and just fall back to the strategic depth of, Miami. How close do you think we actually are to that happening?
I don't know. I don't think. I think if the U.S. is ever going to use nuclear weapons again, it's going to be a reaction to someone else using nuclear weapons, right? So even if it's like one of the what do they call it, the little strategic nukes that are supposed to be like smaller, whatever, dirty bombs or whatever they call them, maybe a reaction to something like that. I don't think I don't think the US has I just I don't well, I mean, I guess if there's a president like like about to be out of office or already looking at possibly being tried for war crimes or something like that. But I think there's too much international pressure. Even though I'm not a big believer in international law, just because it's like who has the power to uphold international law? and it's basically the United States. Like, and so it's like, okay, so it's not international law. It's who we say broke the law. It's US law. It's hegemonic law. Um, but I think the international community would have a real problem with the world's superpower making the statement. I mean, because what you're saying, if you turn a nuclear to your nuclear arsenal, you're saying we have no other option, right? You're saying we can't beat you with just military force. We have to turn to the nuclear option, which is why it's called the nuclear option. I don't think, like Donald Trump, for instance, I don't think he's brave enough to admit defeat. So I don't think he would do that because you're admitting defeat if you turn to that, right? Um, Israel, I have no idea what Israel's capable of. Honestly, I couldn't even begin to guess um, what Israel what Israel would or would not do. Um, they seem like Netanyahu just seems like a lunatic to me. So I don't take anything off the table with him. I'm just like, I have no idea what this guy's capable of. You know, people talk about Donald Trump like he's this maniac and he's unpredictable. And I was like, to me, there's no more unpredictable world leader than Bibi Netanyahu. I couldn't tell you what he's thinking and what he's going to do. Um,
He's got a lot of bad incentives. That guy.
yeah, yeah, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know if they would use a nuke. I mean, I would hope not. Like, I would kind of, I don't, when I look around the world and I think about the countries that have nuclear weapons and who I think would be most likely to use it, I mean, the first thought always comes to my mind is Pakistan. I just feel like they're unstable. I just 60% of their population is inbred. Like, it's how how stable can a nation of incest be? So I don't know. So that, I mean, that's always the first one that comes to my mind. But
Ancient incest,
yeah,
modern nuclear weapons.
yeah,
That's a bad
exactly.
combination.
Yeah, yeah. That's where my mind goes when I think about like who's most likely to use a nuclear weapon. But I mean, that's that is kind of ignoring the history that we are the only country in the world that's ever used nuclear weapons. But you also have to remember the circumstances of that. We were the only country that had them at that time, right? So it's not like anybody
It
can
was a new
answer us,
technology.
right? Nobody could have answered with the same firepower. So it was kind of like, oh, you get this one free kind of deal. Yeah. So um, that's not justification of using them. I don't think the U.S. should have used them, but you know, I mean, I can I can say that all day long. It doesn't change the fact that the U.S. did use them, and so, but yeah, it was kind of one of those situations where nobody could respond in kind. Now people can respond, so there is that whole idea of you know of not wanting to destroy humanity. Like, so I don't know. I know some people like would argue against that, but I just don't. I don't think we're going in the direction of nuclear weapons. I think what's most likely going to happen, this, and this is completely me looking at it, everything from a cursory perspective. I don't pay attention to the Iran war daily, like Dave DeCamp and Scott and Kyle and those guys. They know much more about the war and what's happening in the war than I do, and I ever will. But I think Trump's going to find a way to get some sort of deal with Iran that's going to piss off Benjamin Netanyahu, but it's going to, but Benjamin Netanyahu's going to be in a position where he's not going to have much choice because of the stockpile, and there's not going to be enough munitions for Israel to continue to defend themselves against Iran. And so I think it's going to be one of those, they're going to be put in a corner and they're going to have no choice but to just say, okay, like whatever. But until then, I don't think Israel's going to stop doing what they're doing. You know, they're going to keep bombing Lebanon. They're going to keep, attacking Iran until they're in a position where they have no more arms, no more ability to, you know, follow through. That's kind of what I expect. I don't, does that happen? I have no idea. Maybe the Israelis pick up a bunch of sticks and stones and like what was it, Mark Twain had that saying, I don't know what weapons World War III is going to be fought with, but World War IV is going to be fought with sticks and stones. So maybe that's what happens. Who knows? But anything else?
Um, no, that was a good episode.
Yeah, good.
Some heavy stuff, but
Yeah, like I said when we got into this, I don't know how much there's going to be to like comment on because so much of it is narrative and it's just like history. It's just narration of historical facts and things that happen. Trying to break it down into like kind of a psychological breakdown and trying to look at and see what happened and how it happened. So I'm not sure exactly how much we're going to have to comment on in the middle of chapters, but chapters on a whole, I think, are going to give us a lot to think about and kind of respond to.
definitely.
So we'll dive into chapter 4 next week, and
Yes, we will.
we will. I don't know. I don't know page what the page numbers look like. I'll look at it and I'll figure out how many chapters we're going to do, but we'll probably do 4 and 5. That'll probably be about as much as we can do in one day. But
Sounds good.
all right, man. Plug everything you got coming up.
Well, I've started writing news articles for antiwar.com, and the great Dave DeCamp is my editor. And he makes my writing sound good, just like Hunter Durenzis does over at the Libertarian Institute. So you can check out my news articles over there. I'm working on one about escalating U.S. involvement in Cuba this week. So that should be up uh, tomorrow or the next day. What do you got? What do you
Don't
got
we?
percolating, Tommy?
Well, I thought maybe I'm wrong. I thought we had something. Me and you had something on the calendar, but I don't see it on my calendar
I believe we scheduled it for this upcoming Monday night.
for the 10th, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I was looking at, but I didn't. I must not put it in my calendar. But yeah, so I'll be recording with you, and you'll get full reign to ask me any questions you want to ask, and I will answer to the best of my ability. And then we will do another episode of this, and I will continue to do the prologue every morning. There will be an episode of the prologue coming out, except on Sunday mornings. What I've done is I've started releasing them in the evening on Sundays, since I know all you people are at church, right? So, so yes. So the prologue
Smart
will,
strategy.
yeah, the prologue will be coming out 5:30 every morning. So I've already recorded tomorrow's, and tomorrow I will record the next day's, and I will keep doing that. So yes, that's all I got going on. And yeah, we're still reading. I still got. We're in chapter 5 of the Voyage of Saint Brendan the Navigator. I'm reading that, and so yeah, a lot of reading. A lot of reading.
Good living.
Yeah. So, but other than that, I just got to go drive a truck tomorrow now.
We'll drive safely.
Yes, sir. Let's stop this recording because I got to get ready to go to bed.